All right. All right. So we're in here. Um, I'll let um, I'll let Putash play in the background while we upload a little bit. How about that?
Sounds good.
I see John with his head hanging down, wondering how many shillings left in that bag. Cost of living it is rising so high. Dollars see that had heart attack and died. Bills and budgets are waiting. Yeah. Finance ministers are disobeying. Unemployment is rising. And I hear my people, they're crying. Oh Lord, the dollar die. Things are gonna be better, but the dollar die. No more corruption, the day the dollar die. People will respect each other, the day the dollar die. Tell me, brother, is there something I can do? Don't you let frustrations make you.
Okay. So I actually I heard this song a few times in the past. It's definitely a protest song. Um, that is a signal that maybe a decline in U.S. influence and so on and so forth, maybe even U.S. corruption. But he did mention things like how many shillings left in that pound, and um, which is, I'm sure a lot of countries kind of wondering about maybe currency fluctuations that's really out of their control. The cost of living going up, which could fluctuate based on the value of the dollar, so on and so forth. He's talking about a lot of things that we're going to talk about on the show. But anyway, assuming the U.S. is going haywire, a lot of stuff we've kind of predicted. It doesn't seem like it's particularly with the banks. It all seems like it's manufactured by the Fed. That we're back to what SNL savings and loans were back in the '80s, where you have all these banks with these low interest rate mortgages are maybe 2.5%, 3%. Now the Fed's hiking rates, and their money market rates are 4.5%, 5%, and they're higher than the liability. So you have even higher than the assets. So they have assets loans of 2.5%, 3%, and then they have to attract deposits to pay out 4.5%, 5%. So their liabilities, the cost of their liabilities would be higher than the cost of their assets, and it's going to create this intermediation because now you have Apple, who has a money market fund. They have a money market fund that's drawing deposits. So now a lot of these banks are in trouble, and people think it's because of people fear about the deposits. Deposits are fear about will their deposits be safe? That's a good question, because the banks are also making mortgages on commercial real estate at inflated prices. So if the value of the loans I'm making on commercial real estate is based on X, but the value of that commercial real estate asset is 0.3x or 0.4x, then the loans are going to be underwater. We really don't know what the value of these stuff is because there's never any price discovery because the Fed keeps it propped up. And then you have on top of that disintermediation. So that's what's going on with the banks. And it's not going to stop anytime soon. I guess they're trying to find buyers for these weaker banks, but the number of buyers out there are limited because there's so few banks, because all the banks have been bought up over the past decades. Only few names, whether it's J.P. Morgan or maybe some other financial buyout there. 'Cause I'm not sure Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley really want that much exposure to the banking sector, because then they're going to become a bank and have more weight away, get more weight away from their core investment banking operations. But that's what's going on with the banks. It's not going to stop anytime soon. The Fed's going to keep printing money, I think, to just shore up
Yeah.
these banks. The other thing is that just the consumer confidence is not that strong. Consumer spending is down. Now you're seeing more retailers pulling out of inner cities. We talked about this weeks ago. We see Target, Walmart pulling out of inner cities because of wanton theft and wanton violence. Now, Nordstrom's is pulling out of San Francisco. You have the rail traffic declining, which is a definite key economic indicator because people aren't buying as much stuff. That means fewer goods and services being shipped across country. It means rail traffic is down. And also the value of what they're shipping is down. So rail traffic, revenue earnings for the railroads are down, which makes sense. So that's sort of my 20,000 foot level view of the economy. It's no different from what it was a year ago or 2 years ago. It's just that now the Fed can't deny it anymore. That we're definitely in a recession or heading to one shortly.
No, it's I feel like a lot has happened over the last even 30 days, even since the last time we sat down. Obviously, FOMC meeting was just yesterday. We pretty much met expectations of another 25 bips rate hike, and Jerome Powell was very middling, as I would kind of interpret it, where is no clear direction in either way, right? So, they kind of said nothing while saying something simultaneously. The art of obfuscation, if you will. No real commitment. I think one of the more notable quotes was pretty much we're open to we're open to pulling back rate hikes. Okay, great. I would assume so, being that was a part of the plan initially, that QT shouldn't go on for as long as QE did. I don't think we can survive 13 years of quantitative tightening to shove us even faster into kind of an economic winter. Certainly not with the same velocity that we've had 13 years of QE that has caused kind of a similar destruction just from this lens of having a bit of free money, pumping $80 billion a month into their friends' pockets. So it's the market reflected that they really didn't say too much. I think Powell is obviously being very careful to not give anything overly optimistic, but also not giving any direction that's overly pessimistic as well. When we look at, brought up a really kind of really great point, and two things that I think really paint, at least for me, kind of a picture of the future. Obviously, real estate is always a hot topic. Certainly from the residential lens, and we tend to focus on, can folks get into new homes? Can they afford mortgages? What is the income? Are wages keeping up with the rate of inflation, etc.? But one of the things that often doesn't get talked about as much is the commercial landscape. And looking at, you brought up a great point about the commercial landscape, that one of the things that I think contributes to the fact that there is, all kinds of hand waving and signs and posters and, pretty much every highlight you can use that is kind of a dire warning to say, hey, we have this looming problem that is going to contribute to the kind of acceleration of this recession, and that is commercial loans. Commercial loans are the bread and butter of most commercial banks. Every commercial bank, from JP Morgan to Capital One to TD, you name it, has commercial loans on their books. One of the things that is contributing to that is, one, since COVID, the way that we live and work has vastly changed. The amount of people that need the same amount of office space is no longer the same. So does, Google, Facebook, pretty much all of Silicon Valley companies and tech companies need 200,000 square foot office spaces? If they don't need 200,000 square foot office spaces, well, then what is the impact on the malls? Well, we've already been seeing the impact on malls across the U.S., even when we look at commercial REITs and how they have been performing as well over really close to the last 7-8 years, with the continued rise of e-commerce eating into the profitability and the margins of retail commerce. So you have this way of life shaping, excuse me, and it's taking away from really the justification. How do I justify going out, building a commercial building that's targeting, certainly commercial leases that is going to demand higher sticker prices? If I'm a small business and, I want to rent out, if I'm in DC and I want to rent out one of the storefronts in Union Station 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even a, fairly modest sized footprint would have cost me anywhere from 15 to 25K a month. And, I could just be selling pretzels. However, since then, the decay of the foot traffic because of the workforce has changed. Can we continue to justify those prices? Well, when you examine commercial real estate across the country, no longer are those prices justified. So what does that mean? That means that the, either loan to construction value or the overall loan to value to get those commercial places built and invested in are going to be deeply underwater, because these things were priced in for 2010 numbers, 2012 numbers, 2014 numbers, when the Fed was handing out free cash to all their friends. And there was no such thing as a loss. There was
Yeah,
no,
but Tori, on that point though, right? They're facing the same problems that Bed Bath & Beyond, Nordstrom,
correct.
Macy's, Lloyd, was it?
Yeah,
I
Lord
can't
and
think, some of
Taylor.
the names,
Lord
some
and
of the names I
Taylor
can't even remember
just went out of
because
business
they put out of business. Yeah, they put out of business. So
years ago.
people are looking at like Bed Bath & Beyond like as a case study in poor and mismanagement because they couldn't make the transition to online, right? But
Right.
um, I, but as a government, it's like a different reaction when it comes to commercial real estate and the banks, because politically they're more clicked up with the government and the Federal Reserve. So people tend to make excuses for them, but they don't make excuses for Bed Bath & Beyond or some of these retailers who couldn't make the transition
Right.
to
And that's,
this sort of
yeah.
online world.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. The other kind of force that is quickly showing um, its kind of the proliferation and the impact is AI. We're already seeing, so, not to kind of give in to some of the fear mongering that, encompasses the conversation of AI and, will soon be in a world of Terminator and being taken over by bots. Maybe some of that has some validity. Obviously, some of tech leaders have signed letters essentially voicing concerns along with Elon Musk that AI needs significant more regulation and essentially a heavy hand in its rapid development so that we don't end up building the very things that uh, will kind of take us over and subject us to their will. So not to get into that extreme, but looking at it from a more practical lens, just in the last week alone, Microsoft, Facebook, IBM have all cut thousands of jobs already because of the AI impact. AI is taking away more jobs. Obviously, there is going to be a learning curve because I think that at some point new jobs will be created, new roles will be created that didn't exist, last year, 2 years ago. But that's going to take time. What's happening to these thousands and tens of thousands, and certainly has the potential to hundreds of thousands of workers that will be replaced, whose roles will be replaced by AI. Netflix is facing, or Hollywood, I should say, is facing a writer's strike as we speak. Studios are already replacing those writers, not with people that are willing to step over the lines, as we call them, scabs, but they are already rewriting scripts using AI. Why do you ever need to deal with unions again? Why do you ever need to deal with folks that no longer want to conform to your corporate rules, policies, and structure?
So
So,
do you when you say rewriting scripts, do they take their own scripts and just put into the AI module and then just spits out a new
yep, yep.
but it has to be their own scripts. They can't take a script from if I'm Law and Order, I can't take a script from some other show and put it in. Yeah, I can't do that. It's illegal, right?
Yeah, you can.
If you get
As
caught.
long as it has enough, I think, variation and change. And certainly, I'm certainly not an IP lawyer. But from my interactions with IP lawyers, it is my understanding that as long as it has enough deviation, what that standard of deviation is, the courts kind of set that. But as long as it has enough, then it's certainly kind of free and clear. It's and I think, or at least I think about it when artists, like musicians, will leave their label, but the catalog is with the label. So what will the musician do? They'll re-record all of
Hmm.
their music and put out their music under their own management.
Got it. Got
Uh,
it.
but they had to redo it and tweak a certain amount of things in order for that material to be considered a deviation from the original. So that's how I
They just
certainly think about it.
they never leaving to put out like a lot of just dump a lot of bad music and then say the good stuff for when they become independent. But I guess now a lot of these writers will just be replaced with computer programmers, kind of. These
In a
writers for the
lot of
movies.
ways, I think so. So, in other words, we're already seeing like ChatGPT has only been out to the public. I don't even think it's been 6 months at this point. We're seeing variations, God Mode, Auto GPT, Agent GPT, and others. Literally every single week, new programs are being like, and not just like one or two. I'm talking about every week, dozens to hundreds of programs are being released due to AI. The pace at which AI is evolving, it is like certainly unlike anything that I've seen in my lifetime. This is this is the fastest adoption of technology I have ever seen, even more than the advent of the internet. Thankfully, I'm old enough to remember when the internet was becoming popular, 93, 94, where you had the Netscape and the AOLs and the Yahoos. But it still took another maybe decade or so before you really saw internet in homes. And it still took another maybe 5 or 6 years even after that before everyone or a lot of folks had internet on their phones. So, there was an adoption period. The curve for adoption, this is wild as far as the speed. This is like Mach 1 speed at which it's adapting. So my only point is that you have this force that is impacting our labor force. We do not live in a country that significantly values the human capital labor force. We are in a structure that incentivizes reducing cost and increasing profitability. We see that in the stock market every single day. Companies let go tens of thousands of employees, and what happens to the stock price? Pops. Why? Oh, because you just cut a significant portion of revenue or cost, 10%, 15%. Great. That means more profitability. So in other words, when you have these forces where we're looking at potentially a massive amount of folks now either having to be reskilled for new jobs that may not exist as yet, but there's going to be a time period where we're going to see a lot of folks flooding the unemployment line. And on top of that, you have a changing landscape that no longer needs the size of these commercial properties. So what does that mean for every bank that is exposed to these commercial loans and the overall economy? To me, these are forces. These two things alone give some pretty stark outlook, for the economy. And frankly, I'm not certain, even with the rapidity that we're seeing banks, we just talked about Western Alliance, Pacific as well is another bank. We obviously just saw First Republic this week kind of get wrapped up, and with talks of another dozen banks, regional banks on the horizon of suffering the same fate. What is that, kind of to your earlier point, what does that really mean for the average person? Can I even trust my money being somewhere? Sure, folks can run to credit unions, and I'm sure credit unions are experiencing an explosion in memberships and deposits, which is great. But at the same time, we are living through a economic facelift as we speak.
Right.
And it's going to be, I think much like surgery, it's going to get extremely ugly before it gets pretty again. So, yeah, I guess that's my, my 2 cents on what I think is impacting our economy and kind of the future we may be looking at in the very, very near term future.
Thank you for that. That's it's a good good summary. I think this it's a long time coming in a lot of ways. Commercial real estate couldn't just keep rising in perpetuity like this. It was bound to come crashing down, and it's all government manufactured. We've been talking about this for a while. Why let's prop up assets to help the investor class to keep their assets from being deflated after the financial crisis. Now we have another problem, and the problem with a lot of this stuff is that you entering uncharted territory when you start having low interest rates like this for forever, or quantitative easing forever. That's not really for I don't think economic purposes, but more for political purposes, because it's helping these politicians, donors, and type of companies they want to go work for when they leave office. It's all political politics. I mean, I don't know how millions of consumers are benefiting from the rising commercial real estate prices or rising asset prices when they don't own the assets. So another thing about the tech companies, propping these tech companies and propping the stock market to help these tech companies, it's not. I don't think it's good for the economy. All you're doing is filling these people's coffers. Not the entire workforce of these tech companies, but the people at the top, the few of the owners. So if we can give example, Snapchat, when they went public, they created jobs, but the majority of the lion's share of the capital was raised went to the owners. And when it starts to shrink, these people end up getting laid off. But when you prop up these tech companies and you give them all this capital, all they do is come up with R&D to figure out a way to cut jobs. Come up with new technology to cut jobs. That's all you're doing. I don't know how that benefits anybody.
You end up building the very thing that's going to get you fired.
Right. But I'm saying from politicians, I don't know what purpose does it serve. These people are predatory. These investment banks are predatory. The technology companies are predatory, and it's all, to me, a lot of it's just government manufactured, or government generated. But especially with the problem with the commercial real estate and the banks. So that's my opinion. But so now we have potential for the dollar to die. What Peter Tyson was saying around for years, the day the dollar died, definitely protests on in Jamaica, and may be coming to fruition. So the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, are talking about, I don't know how far along they are, coming up with a currency to trade oil and other commodities. And the benefit for them is that it helps to relieve any burden from U.S. sanctions. That's one benefit for them. But I'm going to read an article I wrote for Seeking Alpha. This was back in 2016, April 2016. And it says Halliburton abysmal $700 million exposure to Venezuela. And this is what it says. It says it talks about the state oil company in Venezuela, and they were having trouble paying their debts because the economy in Venezuela was contracting. Okay, and so it says here, this is basically an overview of the situation. Venezuela receives over half its revenues from the sale of oil. It missed the opportunity to diversify its economy when oil prices were above $100. Now the route in oil prices has punished the country. It borrowed $60 billion from China in exchange for a steady flow of oil. However, China's consumption of oil and other commodities has declined as its own economy has declined. So basically, China was making loans to Venezuela and other countries that had oil, giving them billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, to help shore up their cash flow in exchange for oil. So China was buying oil in exchange for loans. So they already kind of, it's, even though it doesn't have not a lot of natural resources, it has access to oil and oil reserves because they're buying it from sort of cash-strapped countries in South America. So they kind of already, and then the fallback was that these loans were to be repaid in yuan. So it's kind of getting a lot of these countries off the dollar to begin with. And they're kind of trading oil in a synthetic way with the dollar, with Chinese yuan, and not trading it with the dollar. And so we kind of talked about this a little bit, where I think these BRIC countries, particularly Russia and China, were kind of maybe backed into this by the Biden administration. When Russia entered the Ukraine, Biden basically said, he wanted to punish the ruble. Remember the ruble crashed, and he wanted the European countries, European allies, to stop buying Russian oil. And they did that for a little while, which hurt Russian oil sales, but also hurt the ruble. However, whereas given that Russia was a big oil supplier, where would the Europeans get oil from? They can get it from the U.S., but it's going to cost more because we have to transport it a lot further.
Right.
Then what ended up happening, there was Russia was selling to China, and the European countries were buying it from China. And then China was making them pay yuan for it. So it still was buying oil not based on the dollar. So it's kind of like getting off the dollar in a roundabout way. The other thing is now Europe realizes that they really need Russian oil, so now they buy oil from Russia. And Russia basically said, we want you to buy oil based on the ruble, not based on dollars, but based on the ruble. So it kind of like backed Russia into a corner. Russia doubled down. So yeah, we're still gonna sell oil now. Not only are we not gonna sell. Not only are we going to sell oil to you because you're gonna have to come back to us eventually, but we want you to pay for it in rubles. So we kind of backed them into this roundabout way of getting off the dollar. So now the BRIC countries are all together now talking about one currency that could trade oil and other commodities. And I guess some high level statistics basically the non-share of international currency transactions occur in dollars. A large share of foreign exchange reserves are in dollars, and then you have at one point up to like 40% of global debt was in dollars. So the dollar is dominant for now. Okay, and that's just the sort of high level statistics. I'll let you speak to sort of the implications of the this one currency for the BRIC countries, and how does it affect foreign policy, if at all? Right. Right. Mhm. To kill a dollar. I mean, let me know if you agree with this or not. To kill the dollar or to do what these people are supposing, the BRIC countries are proposing, you need two things. You need a commodity that's highly traded. And they have that. Russia has one of the largest oil reserves in the world. China, through its ownership, practical ownership of maybe Brazil, Venezuela, some of the African countries, probably has, synthetically a large access to oil reserves. They can trade oil, right, without using the dollar. The other thing, you have to have nuclear weapons to thwart any aggressive act from the U.S. Because when you start talking about getting off the dollar, it's an act of war, and China and Russia both have nuclear weapons, and so they have both both things that you need to do what we're suggesting. Because you talk about, like, look at people who tried to do in the past. Gaddafi, he tried to start the gold dinar, and one currency for African countries and Middle Eastern countries, a single currency that would be backed by gold. Okay, and as, and it was a threat to the U.S. dollar because they had so much oil reserve. They said Gaddafi had about 143 tons of gold. And so he wanted to be backed by gold. He wanted to be backed by gold. He wanted to get off the dollar, and they had a large reserves of oil that could be traded globally based on the dinar, and could put a dent into the U.S. dollar as being a trade currency just based on that alone. But they couldn't keep the U.S. at bay in terms of militarily, and that's, people say that quiet as it kept. That's one of the reasons why, if not the main reason, we attacked Libya during the Obama administration. It wasn't to stabilize Libya or stabilize the Middle East. It was because uh, Gaddafi, the gold dinar, and Libya had become a threat to the financial system, to the U.S. dollar, and also to the French franc. And then you had, in the early 2000s, you had Saddam Hussein talking about he wanted Iraqi oil to be traded in euros. Want to be bought in euros and traded in euros, and we know what happened to him. But then Gaddafi thought that because he could connect other African countries, that could keep the U.S. at bay. But you couldn't stop the U.S. militarily. But these BRIC countries with Russia and China do have that from a high level. I don't think the dollar needs to go to zero, but you could definitely hurt the U.S. economy drastically just by reducing the value of the dollar. Now that the oil is pegged to the dollar, the U.S. can print, has an unlimited ability to print dollars, so they can buy oil with dollars by keep printing dollars. You can't print gold, but they can definitely print dollars. If this one currency from the BRIC countries takes hold and just has a small impact, where more oil, more large commodities, more high volume commodities are being traded with this one currency from the BRIC countries, it could definitely get people off their reliance on the dollar, and it could force the U.S. to print even more dollars. If the dollar declines, dramatically, they don't have to go to zero, but it requires to print more dollars to buy oil or buy other commodities, and that could definitely have an inflationary effect, which is what Peter Tosh was kind of alluding to in the song "The Day the Dollar Died." How many shillings this is going to convert to the pound? You know what I'm saying? So it could definitely have an impact, and definitely inflationary effect, because we keep printing dollars to buy oil or buy other commodities. If people reduce their reliance on the dollar for oil or other commodities. That's how I see it. I think that's the immediate impact, the inflationary impact of the decline in the purchasing power of the dollar. Not just even for you and I or people who travel abroad. I'm talking about even here, while we're here, having to flood the market with dollars to buy oil or other commodities. Mhm. the cat's away, the mice will play, right? I mean, and so these Africa also knows the U.S. has its hands full with Russia and China specifically. They probably can't deal with all these different issues at once. Well, right, and when you start talking about practicality, this one on all those lines, this one currency by the BRIC countries, it may be a need, not just a want, though. If you think about it, given the ambitions of China and Russia, when they talk about a one currency away from the dollar would reduce their exposure to U.S. sanctions. We know U.S. sanctions are coming because we already applied sanctions to Russia when they entered the Ukraine. Now China wants to take over Taiwan. So when there are any escalations or any movement around the peninsula, around Taiwan, and U.S. applies sanctions, this one currency can reduce exposure to those sanctions. So this one currency may not be a want; it may be a need, given that they expect U.S. sanctions to come, if not economic sanctions to come. So it's almost like you beat the U.S. to the punch. You drive economic sanctions before they can apply economic sanctions onto you, because nobody wants to get into a nuclear war with anybody, but they know economic sanctions is the lever the U.S. has to keep them from these incursions into further incursions into maybe from Russia into Czechoslovakia or Poland or whatever, and to keep China from trying to take over Taiwan. So it's almost like a, a need for this one currency rather than a want. It's like an oxymoron, right? but Gaddafi didn't have that problem. Gaddafi didn't have that problem, right? Because it was backed by gold. If he had 143 tons of gold, and you know who has the most influence, you know who has the most gold, right? Okay, okay. Well, I think they're gonna call it the brick in general. Yeah, but the price of the brick is going up. You know. Right, right. Russia's already broken. Russia's already broken Europe, so the brick could also break the brick currency could also break Europe and force them to trade and. Right, 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 right. Right. And like most of what we talk about on the Trump and the G, the rest of the country has no idea what we're talking about. They have no idea they have no idea what we're talking about. They have no idea what's on the horizon. They have no idea why this all this is even important. You know what I'm saying? And so President Trump, former President Donald Trump, said a couple of weeks ago when he made his speech down in Mar-a-Lago after he had been arraigned, he said the attack on the U.S. He talked about a lot of things that happened since he's been out of office. We weren't at war when he was in office, and the attack on the U.S. dollar was not happening when he was in office. There was no dust up from China or Russia in this way. Matter of fact, he was being accused of being too close to China, too close to Russia, and the Russia helped them win the election. Now look at the problems we have now. Now we have Russia's into the Ukraine. We are at war. People say Trump will get into war. We are at war now in terms of a proxy war, and then you have Russia already in the Ukraine and probably going to make further incursions into Central Europe, and then you have people attacking the dollar. And they're not just talking about it. I think I think Gaddafi was dead serious about the gold dinar. I think that China and Russia and these BRIC countries are dead serious about this currency, this new currency, because again, it's almost it's a practical matter. They almost have to because they know U.S. sanctions either are or could be coming down the road when they start trying to make incursions around the world. And who knows of other African what's going to happen in Africa if when nobody's watching what's going on over there. But Trump said that this attack on the dollar didn't happen when he was in office. Do you agree with that? Mm-hmm. Right, right. Well, right, right, right. These conversations, right, right, or enough world leaders to right, or enough world leaders to like cause the dollar to keep deteriorating, whether another 10%, 15%, because inflation definitely is coming, and Russia was already in Crimea when Trump took over for Obama, but it's just that wasn't China wasn't necessarily talking that loudly about um entering Taiwan. But okay, so we're just went over the hour. So one last parting shot before we go.
instance, they understood knocking down the building isn't. They understand that change if we're in line with that. And I think that is, if they're target 15%, 30%, 5%, I'm not thinking of that. That's it. But I do just think that I think that it is the journey, not to drop it. And sustainable where they can ignore it. What's happening is that rural, the local economy of continue to operate together as base stuff.
Right. 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 Yeah. This may be a little so I guess tangential to what you just said, but I think it could give particularly China and Russia another lever to fight economic sanctions from the U.S. in case they want to engage in any other military incursions, because it can fight economic warfare with economic warfare. If we try to exact sanctions, they can use this as a lever to hurt us economically, and they probably will. They probably will. So that's basically my take. So that's Trump and the G, the day the dollar die. For me and Mr. Mitchell, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.